2025 is going to be an enormous year. 2024 was very much the year where we came out of the energies of the last 3 years. And it was very much a year where we really kind of consolidated and realized all that we've been through since January 2020, when we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and then we had Pluto conjunct also. So a lot has been talked about the fact that the three outer planets are changing signs, but what's also important is that the social planets are changing signs. So as we know, Pluto moved into Aquarius on the 19th of November this year, finally, where Pluto stays for the next 20 years. Then in order of the next, major planetary aspects that we have, we know that Mars went retrograde in Leo on the 6th of December, where Mars will be, retrograde on, for another couple of weeks until mid-February. We're also in the Mercury retrograde period at the moment, from the 25th of November until the 15th of December. Mercury is in Sagittarius at the moment. And yesterday we had the Mercury chasm to the Sun, which is when Mercury is within 1 degree of the Sun, and when the energy is hugely blended and infused and extra strong. So we also have Mars opposing Pluto until the 27th of April next year. So I'll be coming back to that in a minute. Then, as I said, the planets that are, the outer planets changing signs, there's been a huge emphasis on that at the moment. Neptune moves into Aries on the 30th of March, where it then spends 14 years. I'll be going over the retrograde periods later. Then Uranus moves into Gemini on the 7th of July. Where he spends 7 years. We also then, before that, however, have Saturn moving into Aries on the 24th of May. So Saturn usually spends about 2.5 years in each sign, but this time Saturn will be spending almost 3 years because, again, of the retrograde period when Saturn goes back into Pisces. Then we also have the social planet Jupiter moving into Cancer on the 9th of June. We also have the lunar nodes changing sign. The lunar nodes change signs roughly every 19 months. So they're currently in Aries and Libra. And then on the 11th of January 2025, they move into the signs of Pisces and Virgo, where they stay until the 26th of July 2026. So it's, as I have said before, it's an absolutely major year. It's a year where things are finally going to start moving forward after years, after the last 3 years of society and our personal lives just changing and changing and changing. And, one of the themes of the last couple of years has been people standing in their power or giving away their power or not owning their own power enough. The other retrograde period that we have this next year, of course, which we have every year, is Mercury retrograde. Mercury will be retrograde from the 15th until the 29th of March in the sign of Aries, then the 29th of March until the 7th of April in the sign of Pisces. Then later on in the year, we have Mercury retrograde in Leo from the 18th of July until the 11th of August. Then later in the year, we have Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius from the 9th to the 18th of November. And then we also have Mercury retrograde then in the sign of Scorpio from the 18th to the 29th of November. And what a lot of people don't realize about the Mercury retrograde period is that Mercury then also has, 3 weeks in what we call the pre-shadow phase and 3 weeks in the post-shadow phase. So that's kind of like a slowing down of the Mercury energy before Mercury then goes retrograde. Now, we also next year have, in addition to because some years Mercury is retrograde 4 times a year, some years it's retrograde 3 times a year. So next year it will be, just pretty much the 3 times a year. We also next year, however, still have Mars retrograde, and then we also have Venus retrograde. The reason Mars retrograde is such a big deal is because Mars only goes retrograde every 2 years. It's the least retrograde period of all the signs, followed by Venus Aquarius. So next year, both of them will be in retrograde. So, we're in the Mars retrograde period now since the 6th of December, which was literally 2 or 3 days ago. And Mars then stays in the sign of Leo until the 6th of January. Then it moves back into the sign of Cancer until the 6th of February, and then moves direct. So one of the themes of Mars retrograde, it's been interesting to see what people have been writing about Mars retrograde, because a lot of people have been writing about, like, well, it's not, that I'm kind of frustrated, that I'm angry and I can't engage my will. That's certainly not what I've been seeing, either myself or in people around me or in the collective, because Mars opposing Pluto, the first hit was the 3rd of November this year, and it will be opposing Pluto on and off until the 27th of April next year. So one of the themes I've seen has been very much around people engaging their will, very much around, taking fearless action. Because one of the things I learned a couple of years ago, I remember I was quite, angry with somebody over nothing really much at all. And I remember when I dug deep into it, and then kind of thought a bit more about it, I realized, well, actually, what I was angry about with that person about was that they were doing things that I wished I was doing and that I just hadn't bothered doing. So that can be, one of the themes of Mars retrograde opposing Pluto, is like, feeling unnecessary anger, feeling unnecessary frustration. And maybe it's just that you're not taking focused action on something that actually you could be taking action on. And there's quite a big collective theme these days that we always have to be taking action. We always have to be doing and doing and doing. And we actually don't. Sometimes by taking small steps or small focused action, we actually get more done than if we take, a lot of action. So I'll be coming back into that when I talk about the Saturn changing signs and the Saturn retrograde periods of next year. Because we also then have Venus going retrograde. So these are, so not only do we have, 3 outer planets changing signs, we have Saturn and Jupiter changing signs as well. They're the social planets. So the social planets are the planets like that bridge the link between how we interact with others, which is the personal planets, the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, and Venus. And then the outer planets, which are very much linked to the collective. So those are, as you probably know, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But we also, as I said, have Mars retrograde and Venus retrograde as well. So we have 3 personal planets going retrograde instead of just, the usual Mercury one. So Venus retrograde will be in Aries from the 1st until the 27th of March. And then it moves into Pisces from the 27th of March until the 12th of April. So, Venus goes retrograde every 18 months, and then every 8 years, Venus forms what we call the Venus star, which is where it forms a pentagon. So one of the things to do during that time is to look back and see what was going on in your life 8 years ago. Because Venus retrograde is all about reevaluating love, not just love and seduction, but also beauty, truth, justice, your finances, your self-worth. Are you overspending? Because Aries, as we know, is ruled by Mars. So, there's can be quite an impulsive action around Venus being in Aries. But then Venus moves back into Pisces during the retrograde period. So it'll be ruled by Neptune. So, as I said, like, one of the key things to do during the Venus retrograde period is to go and look and see, what were you doing in your life 8 years ago? What did you most value 8 years ago? How have those values changed? What do you value now? I know when Venus was last retrograde in Leo in August of 2022, no, 2023, it was last year. I actually ended up right back in living on the same street. It was only for a week, but I ended up living on the same street that I became an astrologer in 8 years earlier, when Venus was retrograde in Leo. So you might find that happens too. You might find there's a theme around revisiting love, revisiting what you value, because that is usually one of the themes of Venus retrograde. So as I said, like, we have Mars, retrograde at the moment. So that's all about motivation. It's also about conflict resolution. It's also about taking decisive action, not taking decisive anger, taking decisive action, not being afraid to take decisive action. So then we have Saturn, as I said, Saturn then enters Aries on the 24th of May next year. And then it goes retrograde in Aries on the 5th of December 2025. Then it will re-enter Pisces on January the 6th, 2026, and then goes back into Aries and it goes direct on the 14th of February 2026. So it doesn't leave Aries until the 12th of April 2028, which is almost a 3-year period. As I said earlier, usually Saturn is about 2.5 years in each sign, but depending on the retrograde period, that can extend it to 3 years. So one of the themes around, Saturn being in Aries will be taking initiative in relation to your responsibilities, in relation to your own sense of responsibility. Having courage, but also having the courage to act with caution, having self-discipline, having focus, conquering your fears. And on the collective level, we will start seeing, a shift in leadership and a shift in authority. Then we have Jupiter also changing signs, and Jupiter, as you know, it's another one of the social planets. Jupiter is linked with expansion and abundance and teaching and learning. And every 12 years we have a Jupiter return. And one of the things that people don't realize is when we're going through collective transits, when any of the social or the outer planets cross any of the angles, that's usually quite a big deal. And Jupiter crossing an angle or a Jupiter return in your natal chart is something that's often overlooked. We go through a Jupiter return every 12 years, which is very much a reset of what do we most want to learn? What do we most want to teach? How do we most want to travel? Where do we find most abundance? Where do we find, because Jupiter is very strongly linked to our joy. And as I said, like this particular, transit is very often overlooked. So Jupiter at the moment is in Gemini, and Jupiter went retrograde on the 9th of October, and will be in Gemini until May 2025, until June 2025, May 2024 until June 2025. So it's very much a time of like saying yes to everything. And I don't mean to, encourage you to over expand or to over travel. But after what we've all been through in the last 3 or 4 years, sometimes that actually is what you most need to do. A lot is written about how Jupiter is all about learning. Jupiter is also about teaching. Jupiter is also about teaching what you've learned to others, not just to keep learning and learning, but to then go forth and teach it. So, have a look at where Jupiter is going to be in your chart by transit next year. When Jupiter was last in the sign of Gemini in 2012 and 2013, Instagram started posting ads, and it was also when Netflix first came out. Jupiter then moves into Cancer on the 9th of June 2025 until the 30th of July 2026. So one of the themes we might see then when Jupiter moves into Cancer is an increase in our sense of home, an increase in wanting to either travel to find home or to enlarge our own sense of home, or we may find that we are very much expanding our own sense of home and our own sense of values and what home means to us. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to travel more, but it kind of might, because Jupiter in Gemini at the moment is all about, the breezy communication of ideas, because Gemini is, as we know, mutable air. It's all about the exchange of communication, the exchange of ideas, the exchange of learning. So having, as I said, those are the, we've Mars retrograde, we've Venus retrograde, then we've Saturn changing signs, then we've Jupiter changing signs. And then we have Uranus and Neptune also changing signs. So Uranus and Neptune are more linked to the collective energy. And, a lot of what has been written about, Pluto moving into Aquarius on the 19th of November, the Aquarian energy, Aquarius is ruled by fixed air. So fixed air is all about like the higher mind. It's all about, because fixed energy is very internal energy. Fixed energy takes time to express itself. It expresses itself when it's good and ready. So between Pluto being in Aquarius, Uranus moving into Gemini, and Neptune moving into Aries, one of the biggest themes we're going to see, and we're already seeing it, is technology just continuing to explode at the speed of light. We can't even begin to imagine how many more technological advances are out there. I mean, already AI has come into our lives at the speed of light. ChatGPT has come into our life at the speed of light. It's quite normal now already to like turn on your heating when you're still an hour away from home. Using more and more technology is going to be one of the themes of next year. But you can also ask yourself, is that what you want? There's nothing wrong with technology per se, but one of the really interesting things about AI is, from what I've seen, it certainly hasn't let people work less. Not yet, anyway. Maybe by the end of next year, that will be the case, when Uranus moves into Gemini. Because before that, Neptune moves into Aries. So Aries is cardinal fire. So cardinal fire is all about action. And remember, like, not only do we have Neptune moving into Aries, we've Saturn moving into Aries like 2 months later. So there's going to be a huge amount of fire in the social chart and in the collective chart from, the end of March next year. So Neptune spends 14 years in a sign. And of all the planets to interpret, Neptune can be one of the most difficult ones, because Neptune in our chart is very much linked to like our higher self, where we're most selfless, where creativity just comes through us and not from us, where like, we sit in front of a canvas and we paint and we've absolutely no idea what we were going to paint, but we just find the ideas coming through us. Now, the other aspect of Neptune can be delusion and deception and deceit. And, when it re-enters Pisces, we may see an element of that, because then it will be re-entering Pisces on the 6th of October until January 2026. Then it goes back into Aries, where it spends another 14 years until the 23rd of March 2039. So, for 3 years, we'll have Saturn and Neptune both in fire signs. And then we have Uranus moving into Gemini, which is on the 7th of July. So these dates all vary by 24 hours according to where you are in the world. Uranus then, as we know, changes signs every 7 years. So Uranus then moves back into Taurus on the 8th of November 2025, and then goes back into Gemini on the 26th of April 2026 for another 6 years. So the Gemini energy is mutable air. So the Gemini energy is very much, having the dialogue of conversation. It's like, Aquarius is, is fixed air. It's very, very much the higher mind. Gemini is kind of like more the collective conversation. So it'll be really interesting to see how Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini end up playing out throughout the collective chart next year. Because, as I said earlier, we haven't even begun to imagine how much technology is going to change our lives. We now tap our phones everywhere we go. We now get pings to our phones everywhere we go. Now, anytime we want to, I think some people have problems signing into my webinar tonight. The link was checked 4 times, um, there's not a lot I can do about it except send you out the recording afterwards. And then I'm going to be sending you out a sum up of all these major planetary energies. Because the last time we had 3 outer planets changing signs, and it is why it's such a big deal. The last time we had outer planets changing signs was roughly 300 years ago in the 1700s. It was around about 1733. And after that, one of the main collective changes in society was the Renaissance. So one of the things we're also going to see is a huge, and we're already seeing it again through AI, we're going to see more and more technology coming into the art world. We're going to see more and more art generated by AI. Some of it, I've seen quite a lot of it already. Some of it's absolutely stunning. But the thing to ask ourselves, like, is that what you want? Do you want to sit at a computer and, generate a beautiful painting through AI? What about going back to basics? What about getting a canvas, getting paints, going to do your own painting? There's something so much more ethereal about that. There's something so much more grounding about that. So, as I said, with Saturn moving into Aries, one of the most social energies that we're going to have is, initiation with responsibility, taking the initiative to take more responsibility for the Saturn areas in your life. And where Saturn is in your chart by transit is where that's going to be most emphasized, because Saturn, spends about, 2 to 2.5 years in each house. So, of all the planets to look at, as I said, like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are very much more the collective energy. But have a look at, the social planets. Have a look at where Saturn is in your chart. What area of your life do you need to put more structure in? If Saturn is squaring a planet in your chart, then that means that there's, an extra amount of effort involved. If Saturn is squaring Neptune by transit next year, or sorry, if Saturn is squaring Venus, for example, by transit next year to your chart, that will be very much, well, you need to put structure around like what you value. Maybe your finances, maybe not your finances. If Saturn is squaring Mercury in your chart by transit, that will be a theme around, well, wanting to put structure around how you communicate, want to be more structured around how you communicate. And sometimes, particularly with the never-ending flow of information that we have coming to us, on Facebook, on Instagram, we're flooded with information now. So one of the things you may need to look at where Saturn is in your chart is like, well, how can I be more structured around how I communicate? How can I just take a step back and not just be so always engaging with people? There's nothing wrong with engaging with people in social media, but it can lead to an overwhelm. We've been reading recently that TikTok might be banned, is about to be banned in the United States if it's not bought over by a non-Chinese company. That's a Saturnian theme as well as a Mercurial theme. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And as I said, like, the collective themes are going to be very much around, with, Neptune in Aries and with Saturn in Aries, there may be an increase in war worldwide. We don't know. That's something that's, that's actually out of our own, that's out of, we can't actually control that. One of the things I've been saying to clients for the last, 3 to 5 months is, if there's 2 or 3 things that you can do, like if you do relocate, take all of you with you when you go. The other thing I'm saying to people is stay in your own lane. Don't pay, it's easy to say don't pay too much notice to what's happening in the world. But stay in your own lane. Don't get caught up in drama, particularly, when Uranus moves into Gemini and Neptune moves into Aries. Uranus and Gemini will be more groundbreaking technology at the speed of light. Maybe social media will be overwhelming us even more. We don't yet know that. The third thing I'm saying to people is to do everything with the highest degree of integrity possible. Don't play power struggles, don't play power games. And again, Pluto in Aquarius is very much the higher mind. But with Mars opposing Pluto until the 27th of April, we may feel that we want to get drawn into power battles just because we can. And the thing to do is to actually not do that. So, in terms of the full moons and the new moons, I want to talk about those and give you the dates of those, and then give you the dates of the lunar eclipses. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the chart for when the outer planets change signs and when Jupiter and Saturn change signs. So the full moon and the first full moon of next year is on the 13th of January in Cancer. On February the 12th, then we have the full moon in Leo. On March the 14th, we have the full moon in Virgo. On April the 12th, we have the full moon in Libra. On May the 12th, we have the full moon in Scorpio. On June the 11th, we have the full moon in Sagittarius. On July the 10th, we have the full moon in Capricorn. On August the 9th, we have the full moon in Aquarius. On September the 7th, we have the full moon in Pisces. On October the 6th, we have the full moon in Aries. On November the 5th, we have the full moon in Taurus. And then on December the 12th, we have the full moon in Gemini. So the full moon, as we know, is a time of letting go anything in your life that no longer serves you. So again, look at where the full moon is in your chart to see what you're being asked to let go of on each particular month. And I am going to be doing a monthly full moon webinar starting in January next year. I'll be talking about that later on at the end of this presentation. The new moons then are very much a time of setting intention for what you want to bring into your life for the next 6 months, when the moon then goes back to the same sign, but as a full moon. So the new moon in Aquarius is on the 29th of January. Then on February the 27th, we have the new moon in Pisces. On the 29th of March, we have the new moon in Aries. On the 27th of April, we have the new moon in Taurus. On the 26th of May, we have the new moon in Gemini. On the 25th of June, we have the new moon in Cancer. On the 24th of July, we have the new moon in Leo. On the 23rd of August, we have the new moon in Virgo. On the 21st of September, we have a double new moon because we also have it again in the sign of Virgo. On the 21st of October, we have the new moon in Libra. On the 20th of November, we have the new moon in Scorpio. Then the 19th of December, we have the new moon in Sagittarius. So we've no new moon in Capricorn next year. So they're the dates of all the moons. Then I also wanted to give you the dates of the lunar eclipses and the solar eclipses. Just give me one sec. I have them here now. We have the lunar eclipse on the 13th of March at 24 degrees Virgo. We have a solar eclipse on the 29th of March at 9 degrees Aries. We have a lunar eclipse on the 7th of September at 15 degrees Pisces. And then we have a solar eclipse on the 21st of September at 29 degrees Virgo. So eclipses are very much portals. They're double or treble the size or the energy of either the full moon or the new moon. They're very much portals where if we just sit back and let everything go, we get huge insights into where we need to be going in our lives and what we need to be doing. It's no coincidence that I moved to Portugal during a lunar eclipse. I went back to Portugal during a solar eclipse without particularly realizing it. So what I'm going to do, as I said, is I'm going to bring up the charts I'm going to bring up, first of all, the charts for the energy of the 1st of January 2025 and share it with you here. So here's the chart for the 21st of January, or sorry, the 1st of January 2025. So there we have Pluto in Aquarius. And as we can see, there's very, very strong Aquarian energy at the start of the year because we have the moon opposed Mars, but we also have the moon conjunct Pluto and conjunct Ceres. And Ceres was very much an overlooked planet during everything that happened in 2020 because Ceres is very much linked to how we nurture ourselves around land and family. And one of the things that I've certainly seen an increase of in the last year or two has been, a lot of people telling us to take supplements. Now, whether you regard homeopathy remedies as supplements or not is up to you. But I know, I mean, I had a lot of people telling me I needed to take supplements. And at one stage I was taking $120 worth of supplements a month. I'm now in Italy for the last 2 weeks. I haven't taken any supplements. I feel fine. I feel better actually. So, the idea of, because Ceres in Aquarius, it's kind of like the higher mind around how can we really, really, really nurture ourselves. And given the fact that, Ceres is conjunct the moon, is conjunct Pluto. There's a collective theme starting into the year around how can we deeply emotionally transform our higher mind to nurture ourselves in ways that we know are best, as opposed to in ways that the pharmaceutical companies tell us we need to nurture ourselves, or even the multivitamin industry, or even the health supplement industry. Because, we need to listen to our bodies more. We don't necessarily need to be taking all these supplements that we keep getting told we need to be taking. So I'm not saying to stop taking supplements, but I am certainly saying to, revisit it a bit, or a lot. The other theme we have here, now we've had this theme since August the 4th of this year. We have Neptune conjunct the North Node. So Neptune conjunct the North Node is very much, what our soul longs to move forward to in this lifetime. So we have Neptune conjunct the North Node until the first week of May, and it's been of next year. And to my mind, it's been a very overlooked transit. It's also, what's my highest ideals? What do I most want to bring into vision into my life? Not so much about like how Neptune is asking the aspect in the other planets by transit, but again, have a look at where Neptune is in your chart, because where Neptune is hitting off the other planets in your chart, whether they're personal planets or social planets or outer planets, will really impact you. Because, at the moment, Neptune is in Pisces and the North Node is in Aries. But as we know, then Neptune moves into Aries and the North Node moves into, where are we now? Pisces. So there'll be a huge shift in energy when that happens, from the 11th of January and then again from the 30th of March or the 1st of April. So the next chart I want to bring up is the Saturn in Aries chart. So here's the Saturn in Aries chart. So Saturn moved into Aries, the 24th, 25th of May, 26th of May, depending on where you are in the world. So as we can see, this is a particularly warlike chart, given that there's so much Aryan energy. We've Saturn in Aries, we've Neptune in Aries, we've Ceres in Aries, we have Venus in Aries, and we have Chiron in Aries. So when we look here, we have Neptune conjunct Ceres, and then we have Neptune conjunct Saturn. And then this time we have Saturn conjunct the North Node. So again, and as we can see here, the North Node has moved into the sign of Pisces. So there's a really strong, not so much a warlike theme, but a very warrior-like, determined energy around how can I really take decisive action? Because, Neptune, because Venus is one of the personal planets, Chiron is one of the bridge planets, bridging the gap between the social planets and the outer planets. Saturn, as I said, is very much, where we take individual responsibility for ourselves. So, Saturn conjunct Neptune is very much because we get those two conjunctions roughly every 28 years. So when Saturn is, anytime I see Saturn conjunct Neptune in a natal chart, it's very much somebody who's a structured dreamer, who can bring huge visions into fruition. One of Ireland's most famous hoteliers, Francis Brennan, has that aspect in his chart. And, when he set up and when he bought the Park Hotel in Kinmare, it was one of Ireland's first five-star hotels in the depths of, a recession that was so bad we didn't even know it was a recession. It was just like nobody had any money. And that went on to become one of the most successful five-star hotels in the country. For several decades. So, Saturn Neptune is very much, and again, it's Aries. So it's structured vision around our dreams, but it is in Aries. So because Aries is cardinal fire, there can be a theme of maybe expanding too much in people's individual charts. So one of the things to do is to take, as I said, it's courageous action. It's courage with caution. It's self-discipline. It's, on the collective level, it's a shift in leadership and authority, but it's also around conquering your fears. But because these planets are all in Aries, there's a theme around where don't overextend yourselves, lads. Don't take too much on. And the Aryan energy just really wants to be gung-ho and get things going and not care too much about what happens or how it gets done. But the lesson is to rein it in a bit, or else if you find it hard to do that, get somebody else to help you with whatever your warrior-like, Mars-like plans are. The next chart I want to bring up is Jupiter in Cancer. So I know I'm not doing these in sequential order of dates, but I did cover that beforehand. So let's see now. I just need to share it again. So here we have Jupiter in Cancer on the 9th, 10th, 11th of June, depending on where you are in the world. We still have very strong Aryan energy there. We still have, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction with Ceres there as well. But we have Jupiter conjunct Mercury, as Jupiter moves into Cancer. So Jupiter, conjunct Mercury, as I said, one of the themes of Jupiter in Cancer will be an increase around, family life or home life or traveling to find home. And Mercury conjunct Jupiter, at that time will, it will be very much because, the Cancer energy is very much feeling deeply connected to our emotions because it's cardinal water. So, you might find yourself having very, long conversations with family unexpectedly, or close friends, or that your friendships get deepened, or that the conversations that you have a much deeper emotional meaning than they normally have, because we now communicate so much by text or by WhatsApp or even by voice notes. Uranus and Gemini will definitely lead to an increase in voice notes, for example. But, one of the things human beings crave is connection. So, that will be the theme of Jupiter in Cancer, and particularly when it's conjunct Mercury. One of the things that I came across last year was the Blue Zones. It's a documentary on Netflix. It's about 6 or 7 places in the world where there's a higher percentage of people than normal who have reached over the age of 100. And interestingly enough, it's not just diet. One of the places is in Japan. There's one in California. There's one in Sardinia. But like in Sardinia, they drink coffee and they drink wine. In that particular community, but it's not just about the diet. And it's not just about exercise in terms of going to the gym and pumping iron or doing Pilates or doing hot yoga. The town in Sardinia is a very, very hilly town. So the older people get exercise by just walking up and down the hills, going to the grocery shop, doing their shopping, gardening. There's a lot of research out there that says that gardeners live longer than a lot of people. And it's interesting because of my own family. One close family friend is still around and he's 91 and he was the gardener. But it's also about community. It's about having coffee with your friends in the local piazza in the morning and having lunch with your friends or having dinner with your friends, or people coming up to check on you if you're not feeling well. So, we're going to see an increase in those kind of zones, because that's also the other side of of Uranus and Gemini and Neptune in Aries, is people wanting to take warrior-like action around, well, I'll create my own community, thank you very much. And Pluto in Aquarius will really testify to that. So that's, that's part of the theme of Jupiter, Jupiter moving into Cancer, people creating their own sense of home, creating their own sense of community, which is something that we all long for on a soulful level. So I'm going to be doing Uranus and Gemini next, so we can see what aspects are happening there. So here's Uranus moving into Gemini, 0 degrees Gemini, and interesting, we still have, there's so much Mars energy still going on, when Uranus moves into Gemini and as I said, like when Saturn moves into Aries. But the interesting thing about, Uranus and Gemini is like when it moves into Gemini, it's conjunct Venus. And it's also trining Pluto. And Venus is also trining Pluto. So Uranus conjunct Venus, it's, when somebody has it in their natal chart, it's very much somebody who wants freedom to be who they are in committed relationships. It's not that they want to go off and have affairs or anything. It's that they want freedom in a relationship. So Uranus conjunct Venus is going to bring, it's kind of quite a conflicting theme on Jupiter and Cancer and Jupiter Mercury, which is like wanting to feel emotionally connected to family and to home. Uranus and Gemini and Venus and Gemini is completely different to that. It's like, well, I want freedom in terms of not just my ideas, but also what I value. So Uranus conjunct Venus will be bringing new ideas into like, what do I value? There'll be an increase in value in the higher mind, in the exchange of ideas, to bring technology to us for the greater good of humanity, because, it's not really for the greater good of humanity at the moment. When people like Ryanair talk about they're going to do away with check-in desks so that people can just do check-in on phones. That's not really for the greater good of humanity. But Uranus and Venus in Gemini will be, having the dialogue of conversation around, well, look, this is how I am in a relationship, but this is how I want to communicate in a relationship, and a more flowing freedom in relationships, because, Venus conjunct Uranus, at the start of Uranus moving into Gemini will bring that in. But also, Venus trining Pluto is very much getting to the depths of our value system. And what do we really value, and how are our value systems changing? Because remember, Venus will have just gone direct. Venus will have been retrograde in the couple of weeks before that in Aries from the 1st until the 27th of March, and then in Pisces from the 27th of March until the 12th of April. So the last one I want to cover is, where are we now? Sorry, I need to stop sharing here. Is Neptune in Aries. So here's Neptune in Aries. So, we still have Jupiter in Gemini because Jupiter hasn't changed signs yet. So there's Neptune in Aries, and there's still, quite a lot of fire in the chart when Neptune changes signs. But it's also very Piscean season, because the North Node is now conjunct Saturn. Ceres is there, still really, really strong. Ceres, as I said, has been quite an overlooked planet in the last couple of years. But Ceres in Pisces is very much around, the higher vision for the collective, because even though Neptune is in Aries, it's now being toned down a bit by the Piscean energy of Ceres in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, the North Node in Pisces. There's the Venus retrograde there going on. There's Mercury retrograde. So as Neptune moves into Aries, it's not going straight into cardinal fire in the sense of like, wanting to take warrior-like action around the higher ideals for the whole collective. That won't really start kicking in until Mercury and Venus move out of their retrograde periods. So I just wanted to do a sum up to say that, as I said, what I've been doing is I have brought out a 2025 year ahead, a particular transit session that gives you a deep dive into where the outer planets are going to be in your chart in 2025, how you can work with the energy of those planets. But as I said, to my mind, on a personal level, Saturn and Jupiter changing signs is going to affect you more personally, plus Mars being retrograde and Venus being retrograde. So not only are you going to be, triggered to change how you work with the collective in ways you can't even imagine right now, but you're also going to be triggered to completely restructure your life with the Saturnian energy when it moves into Aries. And the same with Jupiter moving into Cancer, reevaluate everything to do with home. So, I personally think that from the 30th of July on, people will be relocating at the speed of light. So one of the things, as I said, I'd be doing in the 1 hour 2025 year ahead webinar is covering where the outer planets are in your chart and what those collective themes mean for you personally. And if anybody has a Saturn return coming up, which is the age between the age of 28 to 30 and 58 to 60, obviously I would be looking at, how that's being activated in your chart. Jupiter returns, as I said, are every 12 years. They're often overlooked, but they're hugely important. Like when I had my last Jupiter return, I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States. When Jupiter and Saturn cross any of the 4 angles in your chart, that's also a big deal, because when Saturn crosses any of the 4 angles, it's a restructuring of your ascendant, which would be how are you seen in the world. If it's opposing then your descendant, it's a similar but different restructuring around how you are with others. Saturn on the midheaven is a restructuring of your career or your vocation or how you want to be seen in the world. Therefore, when it's opposing your IC, it would be a similar but slightly different theme around how you're going to restructure around home and family. So when Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto cross angles, they're even bigger deals, because, if Neptune is crossing an angle in your chart, that can go on for 2 years. You mightn't have that transit coming up for another 3 or 4 years, but it helps to know if it's coming up. And then the lunar returns, as I said, are every 19 years, and they can be quite overlooked as well. That can be a real theme around wanting to reset around home. Around about the age of 37 or 55 is often where people buy houses, because they're the lunar returns of the moon. 55 is often where you might sell up and buy another house. So the other thing I'm doing is I'm going to be starting a full moon circle in January. There'll be another webinar for that on the 29th of December, which you can sign up for. It's going up on the website in the next couple of days. It's not up there just yet. And it will be held the Saturday before every full moon. So I have the dates here, but they'll be on the website anyway. It'll be Saturday, the 11th of January is the first one. So they'll be held the Saturday before each full moon. The first one will be 2 hours so that I can give you an overview of what the moon means in your chart, because the moon isn't just linked to mother and home. The moon is also very much linked to our vocation, which is something we don't often realize. So where the moon is in your chart is very often where your true vocation is, which is why when you relocate, if you live either close to a moon line or when the moon changes houses in your chart, which it usually does, it will very often lead to a completely new vocation. So the first webinar will be 2 hours long to cover the themes of the moon in your chart and what they mean. And all the other webinars will be 90-minute long. And what I'll be doing is I'll be giving a theme for each individual. I'll be giving a collective theme as to the full moon for the month ahead. And then I'll be covering each person's individual charts as to where the full moon is aspecting your own chart. And what area of your chart you need to work on to release. So thank you very much for signing up for the webinar. As I said, the next one is the 29th of January. And yeah, I mean, we've all chosen to be here in this time, folks. Our souls all chose to be born to go through this extraordinary time. As I said, the last time we were going through such changes was almost 300 years ago with the Renaissance. So we're coming into a Renaissance period, but we won't really be fully into it until the three outer planets have changed signs. So thank you very much for signing up and for your time. And yeah, I look forward to working with you. If you have any questions, just pop me an email on info@marthaclarkastrology.com. Thanks a lot. Take care.